institutions have been saying, including ordinary people in our compounds and villages and everywhere, have been saying, look, we cannot have a violent society and continue to hold elections marred by violence. And this is it, I think, has been on top of things in telling our politicians that the way we are doing our politics, putting violence first and other considerations last, is not the correct way of doing things. And they warned that at some point, certain stern measures may have to be taken, and they have been taken now. And I think the political parties must comply.
The major culprits, the PF and in the UPND, why are these two at loggerheads?
Well, partly because they are the biggest political parties in the land, but also historically they have had bitter differences between them from as far back as the time of, you remember the Namayani formula and other things that have happened. If you remember in Kaoma, someone was shot dead. Here in Lusaka and Chawama, someone was shot dead. And most recently, at the courts of law, the highest courts of law in the land, we lost 2 lives. And it's always Patriotic Front versus UPND cadres. And so one wonders why they should clash, when in fact it is not the clashing that votes. It is the ordinary people in the streets, in the compounds, in the villages, in the offices, on the farms, and literally everywhere, who are going to decide who should govern Zambia come 12th August 2021. It is not the level of violence. It's not the amount of violence. In fact, the violence sometimes drives away voters from those perceived to be violent, because the fear is, if they come into government, or if they continue being in government with this level of violence, where are they going to leave the ordinary people who cannot afford to be violent?
The million question is, where are the police in all this? Why are they failing to evade, to erase this situation?
Well, I think the challenge the police have is simply that I think they are pressed between a rock and a hard place, in the sense that when they act against, for example, the UPND, they come out with all guns blazing that the police are favoring the ruling party. When the police arrest ruling party cadres or ruling party members, the ruling party hierarchy also comes out with guns blazing that the police are becoming irrelevant and they are not doing the right job. I think the police have been given too little space in which to practice that which they are trained to do. We want to tell the police what to do. We want to show the police how to police the nation, when in fact we are not even aware how they are trained, what they are equipped with, and what they are supposed to do. If we could allow the police, unhindered, whether from the ruling party or from the opposition, to do their work professionally, I think you would be amazed the kind of input our police force would put into this situation.
There's virtually anarchy, coming from, the cadres. They seem to be uncontrollable. They seem not to respect their political, leaders. Why is this pertaining?
Well, it's the way the cadres have been raised. The way you raise children will determine how they grow up. If you raise cadres tolerating whatever the mistakes they make and you look the other side, eventually they will end up misbehaving right in front of you and they will embarrass you. So the challenge we have is we have given too much mileage to cadres, and yet we are supposed to, cadres are an integral parts of political parties everywhere in the world. It's the manner in which you train them, it's the manner in which you harness their resources, because the cadres are not just ordinary people, because some people think that cadres are hooligans. They're not at all. Cadres are all sorts of people, working people, business people, ordinary young men who are drivers, who are taxi drivers, who are conductors, who are just ordinary people in the compounds, who may not have much to do. So it depends on how you mobilize them and how you direct them on what to do. They will do amazing things if you direct them towards peaceful things. Unfortunately, we have a tendency in this country to want to think, even in political circles, that cadres are just tools of violence. So we misuse young men who, if we were to train them to harness their resources, we would use them so usefully in terms of development, in terms of doing so many other good things. But unfortunately, we think that if we use them as tools of violence, then we shall achieve our goals.
The back ends on the two presidents. During Levi Mwanawasa, he took a strong hand, a firm hand, and put a stop to this. My question is two-pronged. Why are these two leaders or the secretary generals finding it difficult to deal with the cadres? That's part of the question. The other part of the question is, what are the difficulties in these two presidents sitting together, and making a truce, stopping this violence? I mean, people have shed blood. They're dying, innocent people.
Well, for the Secretary Generals, because they are the chief administrators of the political parties, they are the people in charge of the cadres. Sometimes they may not even need to meet. Even over the phone, they can speak, agree on certain terms, and ensure that they implement those terms. Ensure that their cadres desist from violence. Because the Secretary General of the UPND, the Secretary General of the PF, normally will not direct cadres to go and be violent. They are lower level party stewards who may want to settle scores, who think that if we beat up our opponents, then we shall gain mileage politically, when in fact not, because you actually lose voters when you become so violent. When you brutalize people, you lose support. For presidents, again, I think attempts have been made in the past for President Edgar Lungu and President Hakainde Hichilema to meet, but oftentimes this has not come to fruition. Either one will blame the other for this or for that, and in the end we don't achieve much. But I don't think really it's about meeting.
Yeah.
The key question is, to what extent do our political leaders respect institutions of governance?
Absolutely.
If you look at the Electoral Commission of Zambia, when they send out information, let's say Justice Esa Uchuru, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, addresses the nation and says, from today, this is what we are going to do. Even before he finishes speaking, some people begin to say, you are a party cadre of the Patriotic Front. And that creates animosity. It creates problems. It lowers the integrity of the Electoral Commission. And when you do that, you are engendering a scheme where your young people also, because what I say about others, my children will listen and they will say the same about other people. So what our leaders say about each other or about one another determines how they approach one another, and also how they approach national issues, particularly in this time, the campaign. You have heard some people have literally refused to heed the call from the Minister of Health regarding the health protocols, regarding banning rallies. We see people, a rally need not be people stationed in one place for a long time. It can be hordes of people, large numbers of people moving along a road, or large numbers of people welcoming someone. As long as there are large numbers of people, that is rallying. And in the process, we have COVID being spread, and in the end, our hospitals, our staff in the hospitals are being overwhelmed. And yet, it's because people want to score points politically. I've always argued there's no point in winning an election with a sick population, Because then who are you going to govern?
There are those who are, Doc, who are saying, yes, we appreciate, that, we're in the midst of, COVID. But at the same time, you look at some other countries, we've held elections during COVID successfully with, less numbers of victims. What is it that these countries have done which we are not doing?
I think they have simply respected the guidance from their ministries of health. They have respected the guidance from the electoral commissions. It is as simple as that. When the electoral commission says this is the way to go, they are a neutral party. I think what they say, we all need to respect that. When the Minister of Health guides that these are the health protocols that we must observe, that we must follow, I think it's important that whether we are politically partisan or not, we must follow those protocols. And it becomes a lot easier to handle elections.
I know financially the political parties are in a difficult situation, including, ECZ. Shouldn't somebody provide masks, to the electorate, during, this time? Is it impossible to do that?
No, it's not impossible. We have been receiving a lot of donations.
Absolutely.
But of course, in an event like this one, priority goes to the people most vulnerable, the people most at risk. The health providers, for example, are working 24/7. The teachers, all those that are coming in contact with large numbers of people need to be protected first and foremost. Because people at rallies can wait, but health personnel cannot wait. Teachers in schools and pupils in schools cannot wait. So we need to prioritize who should be protected first. Of course, all human lives matter in this case, but there are others who can stay at home and still practice the health protocols while at home. But when we entice the youth, we entice young people, we entice women and children and everybody to gang up and either escort us or come to wait for us at a destination or just come to listen to us, then we are rallying. And in the process, we end up endangering so many lives. And when you endanger other people's lives, in turn, you also endanger your own lives. And so it's not a win. It's not a win-win situation.
Let's spend a little bit of time, on this issue because it's very important. We'll be going to the significance of the elections, very shortly. Yes, ECZ has taken measures in as far as elections are concerned. But when you talk about, COVID, you go to social places, hospitality, places. There are hundreds and thousands of people, socializing in restaurants, in nightclubs, and these people are not made to wear, masks. Surely, shouldn't somebody, take this up seriously and compel, those patrons, compel the owners of these places to ensure that these people are wearing, masks? I know it's a difficult, situation to balance between economy and health, but in this situation, there's certain measures that should be implemented.
Well, I think attempts have been made in the past. We remember government shut down all bars and nightclubs, and people began to complain, they began to fret, and they said all sorts of things. But somehow, we managed the situation very well last year. This time around, not just because economically we are so vulnerable. I think sometimes we underrate ourselves. We underrate our resilience as a nation. There are certain steps that government can take to protect people without necessarily shutting down everything and locking up everybody in their homes. But the challenge is, and that is the problem of democracy. You have seen it even in the UK, in USA, when the government says, let us do this, the opposition will normally say the opposite, because people want to score points, because people want to win elections, because people want to do certain things that make them look good in the eyes of society. And in the process, we lose the general good that is supposed to be implemented, that is supposed to be carried out, so that at the end of the day, everybody's health and everybody is able to campaign and therefore can go and vote.
All right. Let's now look at the significance of these elections, tripartite elections. We've had them before. But it seems this one is more significant. From where you stand, Dr. Chiputa, what is your reading of these elections, these tripartite elections? What is in it?
Well, I think people have thrown everything in it. All the political parties that are participating have thrown everything in it. And each one of them is confident that they will carry the day, that they will convince the Zambians to support or to vote for them. Unfortunately, what I'm seeing is there's not much explanation of how each of these political contestants will be able to resolve the challenges that we are facing. The economic meltdown, yes, it's worldwide, but we can find our own solutions, especially that we are lucky we have had, I think, 3 advantages. I think the copper prices are booming. Agriculturally, we have produced more than surplus food. And thirdly, we have improved infrastructure in certain areas in a manner in which you can move cargo, you can move food, you can move many other things from rural areas to urban areas, from urban areas to rural areas. And so because of this, we should be able to resolve some of the challenges that we are facing. Unfortunately, my reading of elections in Zambia usually is that there are certain elements that hold foreign exchange. There are certain elements that courier foreign exchange out of the country. And so we end up with shocks in the exchange rate. And then the cost of living spirals out of control. And if the political establishment in power does not take charge, then we lose it. And in this case, we may be losing it in the sense that I think we are not doing enough. You know, exchange rate, inflation, these sometimes just respond to sentiments. If, for example, tomorrow the President of the Republic addressed the nation and said, from tomorrow onwards, this is the way we are going to treat our foreign investors. And the foreign investors become confident that, yes, there is a stake in this economy for us. This is the way we are going to deal with local businesses. And the local business owners feel, yes, there is a stake in this economy for us. Everybody becomes enthusiastic about the economy. I can assure you, will see tomorrow the exchange rate will begin to respond positively. And things will begin to normalize. But when you leave things to the so-called market forces and you say nothing about what is going on, then you are allowing speculators to take charge. And when speculators take charge, they hoard currency because they are believing that if tomorrow is 22 kwacha 15 ingwe, tomorrow perhaps it will be 23 kwacha. Then I will offload my dollars and make money. So you have people who are making money without even paying tax. So we need, I think, the head of state to put his foot down and say, this is the direction this nation is going to take. This is what we are going to do. This is how we want our foreign investors to benefit. This is how we want our local investors, because every economy thrives on local investment.
As a rider, to that, Doc, the running mate, to President Lungu, Professor Luo, yesterday or today, when she was addressing, the Chamber of Commerce in Chipata, said, that the high costs, high prices are as a result of cartels working against the government. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Or, to a larger extent, some of the problems we're facing are own making?
You see, in every economy, cartels are always there. The best thing to do is expose them. Take them to court, lock them up, and move on. So to say that there are cartels, yes, every economy will always have cartels. But ours, there are even bigger cartels than sometimes we think. And so, yes, there are other intrinsic problems that are in this economy, but there are problems that can be solved. There are problems that can be resolved. We just need to do certain things that we may not be doing, right at the moment, in order to resolve some of these challenges. I will tell you that, for example, certain organizations, even international organizations that run business in Zambia, may produce a certain commodity and not produce another commodity to create demand and therefore increase the price. And in the process, it's the common person and the ordinary person who is paying the price. You remember, I think a few months ago, the Competition Commission moved in and said there is a cartel in cement. They said the prices are these. Those prices have not been implemented. If you move into, for example, the issue of beer, it is a similar situation. Productivity may go down, perhaps because they are innovating certain parts of the breweries, or perhaps because they are doing certain things, so they shut down. That creates continued demand, but less supply, and so the price goes up.
Right. Before we talk about what is at stake, you made reference to some of these economic and social issues. Let's talk about ECZ, the key player in these elections. Can ECZ deliver a free and fair elections from what you've seen now? Is ECZ providing the kind of leadership, providing a conducive electoral process?
Well, perhaps let me say that ECZ is not a novice in conducting elections. They have always conducted elections since independence. And so you have people who are very experienced at ECZ. And it is something that they do every now and then. Literally, they are conducting elections every year. Because if we don't have a general election or a tripartite election, we have by-elections all over the place. And so they have expertise, they have experience, and they are capable of providing a free, fair, and transparent election, because they have done that in the past. And in any case, for ECZ, what is in it for them to mess up an election? It's a loss for them. So everybody wants their credentials to be impeccable. And if that has to be the case, then ECZ has to do that which the nation requires. And I think under very difficult conditions, ECZ has been coming out very well in trying to ensure that they conduct elections in a free, fair, and transparent manner. Unfortunately, because of what we write, because of what we say about them, and many of these things that we say, if we were taken into account and asked to account or to substantiate, you find that people don't have substance in what they're saying. But they make wild claims, they write internationally, they write locally, on social media now especially. You see a lot of things. And ECZ is just one. So they cannot afford to respond to each and every criticism. But that is the situation that we find ourselves in. So we erode the credibility of the Electoral Commission of Zambia, but we do so only at our own peril. Because at the end of the day, we turn around and say, can you now conduct free, fair, and transparent elections? But meanwhile, we have eroded the confidence of the population in that institution. So how do we then insist that they conduct free, fair, and transparent elections? And when they do their best to do exactly that, we still turn around those that lose. Because you see, in politics, there should be no losing, but there should be competition.
Absolutely.
And yet you can never have a competition without winners and losers.
One major facility in any election, Doc, is the voters, register. There's been mixed views as to why the old register was abandoned in preference to the new register, costing a lot of money. What is your submission to that?
Well, my submission is that if the old register was indeed riddled with so many lacunas, some of which could be because there are so many people who have died, there are so many people who have migrated, there are so many people who have ceased to vote for various reasons. What's the point of having such a big book? Okay, big book figuratively, because now material is kept electronically. Why have such a large dossier of names, most of which or some of which may not necessarily be relevant to the current dispensation? I think for me, what is most important is, has ECZ manufactured any names from the blues and added them onto the register? I think that is what should worry people. But if ECZ simply picked the information from all the centers where registration of voters was being done, and those are the names that are in the register, for me it's a cleaner register than a register inundated with all sorts of problems. Like in the past, people have complained that they have alleged, in fact, that even the dead were voting. So if ECZ picks up such information and removes the dead, I think they are doing it for the good of the nation.
There are those who have blamed, if that's the word, blamed ECZ, that this new register is skewed towards the ruling party. In fact, SADC, civil society raised this issue that in those areas where the opposition is strong, the numbers of registered voters have come down deliberately because of unfair strategies the ECZ put in place. And where the ruling party is strong, the numbers have gone up. Is that justified? And I ask this question because I'm not really so sure that it's solely up to ECZ to ensure that more people register. What about the other political parties? Isn't their assignment also to ensure that more of the members get registered?
I think we have flipped the argument now. If you remember 2015, 2016, the argument was that particularly Southern Province was singled out as having registered a lot more people than elsewhere. Of course, ruling out Lusaka and Copperbelt. That Southern Province was leading. Why? If you followed the UPND in 2015, 2016, they mobilized so well in Southern Province. They mobilized so well in Western and Northwestern that they came up with those numbers. I don't think the PF were sleeping and just watching and sitting by. They also learned a lesson and went to their stronghold and began to mobilize in a similar manner. And I think that is why today we have this flip situation where the UPND seems to have been outdone by the Patriotic Front. I think the Patriotic Front learned lessons from 2015 and 2016, and they went and did exactly what the UPND had done. They mobilized. If you saw colleagues in PF and colleagues in UPND, because the nature of our work requires that you work with everybody. Everybody went home to the rural areas, particularly their so-called strongholds, to go and mobilize their voters. And that is how, at the end of the day, when we did the counting, it was found that particularly the PF perhaps had mobilized more of their supporters. But you see, that is an illusion. Illusion in the sense that when elections come, it's not everybody, for example, in Luapula, which is a stronghold of the Patriotic Front, that will vote for PF. If you remember in the last elections, President Lungu would score something like, say, 24,000 in Mansa Central. The UPND leader would score something like 8,000 or 12,000. If you went to Southern Province in another place, barring Livingstone, perhaps President Lungu would score maybe 1,000, HH would score 39,000. So the PF, I believe, as a scholar, learned lessons from what they saw in 2015 and 2016. And they went on the ground flat out to mobilize their members, to mobilize their strongholds. And I think that's how we have ended up with these numbers.
Why not a continuous registration, Doc?
Well, maybe I wouldn't speak for ECZ. Perhaps it's the cost. because you know, to station people away from Lusaka for ECZ is costly in terms of allowances, in terms of transport, in terms of logistics, in terms of so many other things. Perhaps if the Electoral Act was tinkered with to enable ECZ to decentralize, maybe it would be easy for them to continually register people. But to move people from Lusaka and camp them in Zambezi to continually register people every day of the year, I think that is it's not feasible.
7 million is a good number. But what is it going to take to ensure that the majority of them turn up, vote in the end? Do you see COVID, having, an impact?
COVID is already having an impact because the campaigns are problematic because people can't hold rallies. Traditionally we are used to having rallies. Even in the USA, you remember, you saw President Trump insisting on having rallies, whereas Joe Biden opted to use other methods of campaigning like door-to-door or motorcades and things like that. And so at the end of the day, President Trump lost the elections to the Democrats, partly because maybe the manner in which they had organized their campaigns, they subjected so many people to the virus and people reacted. Yeah. And so equally in our situation, I think the manner in which we are, political parties are campaigning, the exposure to COVID will have, I only pray that it should not be a debilitating impact on the outcome of the elections, because we may end up having very few people voting because people will be scared. But I hope, because come August, if there is, as the scientists say, that warm weather sometimes does play a role in putting down the numbers of COVID infections. So it's my prayer that by 12 August, perhaps, the weather will have warmed up, but also that our population, you see, the way we are reacting to COVID this time around is very different from the way our people reacted last year. Last year, people reacted en masse following the regulations. I don't know whether it is the manner in which the information was packaged, or it's just because people think that if you go to the compounds, even now, people will tell you, no, COVID, it's not ours. We are not involved. He say our problem is food. So we need food, we need this, we need jobs and things like that. So really, we are not taking COVID seriously. I don't know what we need to do, but that is why earlier, you remember I said, for me, it needs to take the head of state to speak to the people of Zambia on COVID.
We brought back, COVID again in this issue. We can't run away from this. Can people be compelled to take a vaccine? Because again, people are not taking the vaccine. Should they be compelled, dog, so that our population is protected? Democracy is very expensive, isn't it? Human rights, again, is a difficult situation.
Well, compelling not by force, but there are certain circumstances that can compel people to take the vaccine. If, for example, you say that for you to enter this building, you need to be vaccinated. For you to do this, you need to be vaccinated. Like international travel now. More and more people are being asked to produce proof of vaccination from the places of their points of origin, and that is compelling people to get the vaccine. Unfortunately, in our situation, we have not reached that level, because to compel people, the vaccine must be readily available. How many vaccines do we have in Zambia if we were to compel people? So we are handicapped in that situation. But I think the most important is the health protocols would, for now, be enough to hold back COVID. Social distancing, masking up, hand washing, sanitizing, and avoiding super spread, overcrowding at political rallies and all these other meeting places. I think that can help us a great deal in dealing with COVID.
Apathy. We have just made reference to the 7 million. Now we've got COVID, which might impact negatively. We hope it doesn't. What about apathy? Again, almost every elections, the numbers are very low because of apathy. Should we relook at this and perhaps even go further than compelling and, facilitate a law, which will ensure that everybody who is eligible, to voting, vote?
Well, apathy is a component of democratic choices. Even in developed countries like UK, like the USA and elsewhere, they still face problems of apathy in terms of elections. They never get 99% of the electorate voting on voting day. But there are measures that can be taken to ensure that a lot more people vote. What are these measures? The measures are give enthusiasm to the people, give hope to the people, give an environment that is conducive for personal development, an environment that is conducive for human development in general. And what is human development? The standard of living of the people needs to improve. And so when people see that things will change for the better, they should be able to vote. They are willing to vote. Unfortunately, when I announce in my class, how many of you have registered to vote? Yeah. You want to shut your ears, your eyes. Yeah. Because boys and girls, young men, whose future, this country is in their hands literally, who will be on earth for the next 70, 80 years, have not registered to vote. Then you wonder, you ask them why. No, even if I finish my degree after all, I may not have a job. Then you tell them, look, I'm an historian. The world is never static. Today you have no job. Tomorrow you'll have a job. We have to work together to ensure that we improve this economy. We produce the jobs that you need.
Before we talk about the issues that are played, during these elections, let's talk about the players. 40, political parties, are registered in this country. Maybe not all of them are going to participate, but still the numbers are very high. 8, 9, presidential, candidates. For a small country like this, what do these high numbers do, to the elections, the election result?
Well, yes, certainly it has an impact. But you see, democracy knows no small country. Democracy knows no big country. As long as the legal framework allows for formation of political parties, people form political parties. I have heard people who have formed political parties. You ask them, why did you form your political party? This person says, I formed a political party because I also want to be treated like a president. That's all. Not because they think that they can win elections, but because when there's a gathering of eminent personalities in politics, they're also invited. They're also given a seat at the high table. So some political parties, I must say that we will literally just be escorting other parties. Some will not even participate in the elections because they don't have the numbers, they don't even have the resources to participate in the election. But because of our democratic nature of governance, people are free to form political parties. As to who actually goes into the race and wins the race, that's a totally different ballgame.
Some of them have gone into alliances. Are these alliances effective? What do they mean?
Well, I think for now they are effective in the sense that some literally have said they... let me give an example of FDD and the Rainbow Party. Both Madam Nawakwi and Honorable Winter Kabimba have said that they will support the Patriotic Front. There are other political parties that also have said they will support the UPND. And I think in that sense, I find the alliance is working on the basis of the fact that they are not going into an alliance in order to share seats, but basically to support one big political party and let it win, and therefore perhaps then they may get certain favors. But a situation where they go into an alliance, like the PF went into an alliance in 2016 with MMD, and after winning, they shared certain portfolios in government. The MMD were given some ministerial positions. This time around, I don't see that happening because when you remember the UPND versus NDC, there was a challenge of the political parties being told, those that wanted to align with the UPND, and think that is what has happened, both with the UPND and also with the Patriotic Front. The big parties are fielding all the candidates. If these alliance partners want to field candidates, they must field them under the umbrella of the big political party. I think it operates in both cases. And so that's how we are going into this election.
Can you shed some light on the strategy that President Nevers Mumba has adopted? He's only fielding very few, would be members of parliament, maybe about 13 or so. The strategy he has adopted, in fact, he wanted to stand as an independent. The strategy, according to what he told me during the interview, is that he has already identified 156 good, clean, candidates. If they win, and if he wins as president, he's going to form a government of national unity. So, appointing some of those from the 156 of the people he has identified. Could you unravel this? What is your understanding of that?
If they are standing as members of MMD, New Look MMD, yes, when he...
In New MMD, he's only got 13. About 13.
Yeah, but then that will create a crisis in Parliament, because when you cross the floor, you cease to be a member of Parliament because you have crossed the floor. So how does he opt, for example, to entice members from, for argument's sake, from the UPND or from the Patriot Front or from NDC or from any other political party to join him without them having to cross the floor? That creates a handicap. He has to go into the election. If he has fielded 13, work so hard among those 13, build capacity, enable all of them to win, or at least say 6, 7 out of 13 when they win. Then you have had more than 50% of those that participated having won. That is what Patriotic Front did, you remember, some years back. They fielded very few, and they picked up a member of parliament in Lupososhi, a member of parliament in Kantanshi, and a member of parliament in Chipili. Okay? So they began to build from there, and eventually, within 10 years, Patriotic Front won elections, because they were strategic. Mr. Sata and his colleagues were very strategic, and they were methodical, they were patient. They were not in a hurry, but they knew that at the end of the day, they were going to get the highest prize.
These particular elections, and especially when it comes to members of parliament, the more independent candidates than in any election. Eastern Province alone has got 43 independents. What is precipitated this?
I see two problems.
Yeah.
From what I hear, if that is true. One is that certain political parties did not necessarily look at who was popular on the ground, but they looked at, for argument's sake, for the Patriotic Front, for example, perhaps if Dr. Chiputa was in the previous cabinet and had worked so hard in cabinet, but was very weak on the ground, sometimes it becomes difficult to leave that person out. So you have to plead with the electorate at the constituency to ensure that they elect your member. So you take that risk. Secondly, there are those that believe that it's only them and nobody else. Absolutely. If they are not picked, they will not respect the party. So they are in a political party for gain, not to contribute to the political party, not for loyalty to the political party, but just for selfish ends. If I'm not picked as Dr. Chiputa in this constituency, then I'll go independent. And that is how we have ended up with so many people going independent.
Don't you think Bill 10 also has something to do with this? Because it was attached to the limitation which would have created extra constituencies, and maybe some political parties were confident that Bill 10 will go through and there will have new, more constituencies. Now, in the absence of these, perhaps those who were promised now are angry, they're resenting, they've revolted.
Well, revolting in an election against your political party sometimes is normal, but you can revolt to an extent. But to the extent of ditching your political party creates problems. Some have argued, I'll go independent, but I'll still support President Lungu. I'll go independent, but I'll still support President HH. So we have heard those sentiments. However, at the end of the day, we shot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah.
In the sense that Bill 10 was shot down. But Bill 10 had its own weaknesses.
Right.
Inbuilt weaknesses. For me, as a lecturer in a university, who has not been paid my retirement benefits, to tell me that because of Bill 10, we are going to remove the clause from the Constitution which says people who have not been paid their benefits will be removed from the payroll. At that point, you are shooting Bill 10 in the foot. There were other weaknesses that were inbuilt. Those that crafted Bill 10 should have done a better job. I don't think they did a very good job. And so in the process, Bill 10 was defeated.
Absolutely. Because
some people also thought, particularly some colleagues in the UPND, believed that Bill 10, if it went through, delimitation was going to have more seats created in the Patriotic Front strongholds than in the UPND strongholds. But I think that perhaps that was far-fetched. Why? Because I don't see, ECZ normally will do delimitation on the basis of population.
Absolutely.
In most cases.
Yeah. Let's look at the flip side. You know, we've talked about in more independent members. We saw an upsurge of, you know, women who wanted to participate, but only 20% have been picked to stand. Almost 60 years down the line, these numbers of women who are doing great things in this country, who are now, you know, authorities in a lot of, you know, sectors, only 20%, you know, Doc?
Yes, because we even failed we have even failed to meet 30%. So if 20% have been adopted, how many will win?
Absolutely.
We will end up with a very small number of our women being in parliament. But bear in mind, they are the majority voters. So we are disadvantaging ourselves as a people because of certain things, partly because you remember some argued that it was because of the issue to do with qualifications, that some women, especially in rural areas, who are so vibrant, so hardworking, so community-based in terms of working with the people, but because they didn't have grade 12, they fell on the wayside, or they fell by the wayside, and in the process we ended up with very few women. But there are a lot we can do to change the scenario, to keep encouraging women, but also some women say, I cannot participate in an election where I'll be undressed.
Absolutely.
You know, women are very important people in our societies. So women who didn't want to be insulted, women who didn't want to be stoned. They are riding in a car campaigning and then they see a whole lot of stones raining on their cars. So that creates problems for a lot of our women.
Let's talk about the money involved in this election, even before we talk about the issues and the mode of campaign. Okay, one mode of campaign, because this is a current issue that came out today. You know, the monies they're spending on billboards, just billboards.
Yes.
Okay, in Lusaka, PF has spent, what, 2-point-something million kwacha on just billboards. You know, I think almost 400 billboards in Lusaka, followed by socialists, a young party, a new party, about 800,000, kwacha. And then UPND about 400,000, just in Lusaka. It's going to be more across the country. Again, a two-pronged equation. Are you worried where this money is coming from? That's one part of the equation. Two, suppose one of these, well, obviously one of these political parties will form the government. Are you concerned that wherever they're getting money from could have a leverage on the policies, on the governance of the country, and us, the electorate, will end up suffering, will end up being at the mercy of the funders?
Well, well, partly yes and partly no. Partly yes, because if you are careless in who funds your election campaign, and you swallow whatever they say, who can sink her, then indeed you may end up pandering to their whims and fancies. At the end of the day, they will dictate what you must do for them to recoup not just their money, but to have a stake in your economy. That is possible. No, also because certain political parties raise money for mobilizing, and they raise money from non-governmental funders abroad that give them money merely to promote democratic democratic governance. But yes, you cannot rule out the fact that certain funders want certain policy directions changed should their political party win power and form government. Right.
I'm talking to Dr. Houston Chiputa, a historian. We're looking at various governance issues. When we come back in our last 2-3 questions, then we'll open the lines and you can start sending your messages. This is Frank on Camnet.
Zambia has embarked on an economic journey for individual financial emancipation, empowering its citizens through land acquisition and developing the nation through agriculture. This time, Zambians are coming together, taking it upon themselves with the help of government to develop this great nation by taking individual responsibility and ownership of this great nation. The economic revolution has started. There are thousands of Zambians with a can-do mindset who are resolute, unstoppable, full of confidence and conviction that Zambia's set time of favor for development is now. Don't be left out. This could be the time you have been waiting for. Camnet Television, in conjunction with the United AGRIVISION Consultancy Limited, will be hosting a national conference on becoming a millionaire through agriculture. Date 1st October and 2nd October 2021. Charges 750 kwacha per person per day, that includes lunch. A limited number of participants through Zoom have also been reserved. You can also be part of the conference from the comfort of your home by registering online via Zoom, joining the people who were born for greatness. Charges for participation via Zoom are only 300 kwacha per person. Time 0730 hours to 17 hours. Registration and confirmation of attendance will take place on the 29th of September 2021. Time 14 hours to 17 hours. Venue, the Healing Word Ministries International, the home of Camnet Television in IBEX Hill, Kabulonga Road, Lusaka.
Good evening again, wherever you are in the world and of course in Zambia. My guest, Dr. Houston Chiputa, who is a historian, and we're looking at governance issues, in particular the forthcoming tripartite elections. The million kwacha in a question, what is at stake in terms of the issues that is going to determine or should determine the outcome of these elections?
Well, I think the key issues have to do with the economy, really. And it's an economy that is that has been hammered so badly by COVID-19. But then it's an economy that those that wish to form government come August 12 must find a way around COVID, must find a way around all these other issues to say we are going to create jobs and this is how we are going to do it. Because to say we are going to create jobs, anybody can say that. But we need a formula. How are you going to create jobs? For example, I see on Camnet TV Pastor Chiluba talking about wanting to create millionaires among Zambians. How do you create millionaires? You empower certain people to do certain things and you give them preferential treatment in terms of taxation, in terms of other laws, so that those grow into millionaires and then they employ people. That way, it is possible to create jobs. How are you going to deal with issues of scholarships? For example, for a lot of our children who need scholarships, both at home and abroad, you find a formula and make that proposal of your formula, and if people buy into it, then you are scoring points. Then you tackle another issue to do with all sorts of things like the inflation rate. How are you going to resolve the issue of inflation?
Absolutely.
How are you going to resolve the exchange rate? How are you going to resolve? So these myriad of questions is what should determine who forms government. But again, sometimes we are told the politics of the belly outweigh everything else. So he who pays the piper calls the tune. So those that may produce money may end up winning. But I really doubt if anyone, whether PF or UPND or any other political party, has so much money that they can buy every Zambian to vote for them. I don't think so. So most importantly, I think is to tell people how we are going to go around the problems that we are facing right now.
Again, the million-question question to start with PF. Is PF doing enough to address its record? Are the rest of the opponents doing enough to tell the electorate these are the answers to what you are facing today?
I think that, like you have said, that's a million dollar question that we are facing. The PF has a very good record of what they have done. And when you watch TV, newspapers, and on billboards, I mean, it's not questionable what they have achieved. What we would, personally, I would want the PF to go full throttle into is, yes, we have done this. Now we are going to do A, B, C, D to back up this record of achievement. We are going to resolve these problems in this manner, this problem in this manner, that problem in that manner, and we are going to deal with all these other issues in this fashion. And keep saying that, as long as you believe that that is workable, that is tenable, then people buy into it.
Even in the midst of the high cost of living the people are facing, Doc, do they still have a fertile ground where they can point at?
Yes, they do. You see, they say, I think some British parliamentarian who once said, a week is a long time in politics. Between now and voting day, if the PF convinces the Zambians that they mean well, if the PF convinces the Zambians that the achievement record that they have, solid as it is, can now be backed up with further achievements in these other areas, particularly lowering the cost of living and giving the people a formula how this cost of living will be lowered, then the PF should certainly be able to bounce back. If the UPND can have a formula of telling Zambians, this is the way we are going to resolve your problems, this is the way we're going to create jobs, this is the way we're going to solve all these other problems, then the UPND can also win.
We see a situation...
Sorry, the Socialist Party, I think you talked about the Socialist Party.
Yeah.
When you speak to colleagues in the provinces, they'll tell you that the Socialist Party is everywhere. Like you said, I think they have been very well funded, but they have orchestrated a very good, I would say a very good campaign strategy. The Socialist Party is mostly talking to the youth. Because these are the voters who be voters and continue to be voters. The way banks appeal to people in colleges and secondary schools and universities. That's exactly how the Socialist Party
Unlike in the past, Doc, we see 4 or 5 political parties doing well. I mean, from the reports that we're getting, they could be eating into each other's, strongholds. Isn't this a recipe for a rerun?
Well, a rerun is possible if none of the political parties is able to muster enough votes to beat the 50+1 requirement, constitutional requirement. But that can be avoided, as I've said, if these, particularly the PF, if they can buttress their achievements with solid promises of what exactly they are going to do. And when you promise, you go back and say, we promised you this, we delivered. We promised you this, we delivered. We promised you this, we delivered. On this one, we didn't do well. We promised you this, it didn't work this well, but this is now the new formula we are going to use to resolve what we did not achieve.
In the absence of rallies, in the absence of road shows, hopefully the road shows will be sorted out. It takes a chunk of media, transmission of information. It takes that away. It only leaves you with the media, which can be expensive. And then you've got ZNBC, which the opposition are saying they've got problems in accessing it. Where you sit, what is the impact of this? Who does it favor? Does it favor PF because they've got access to ZNBC, or it favors the people, the political parties, leaders who are going to articulate, these situations?
I think the challenge I have with the argument that the playing field favors PF because of ZNBC is this. For now, I don't think anyone has done a survey as to which is the most popular TV station in Zambia. Yes, ZNBC is the most prevalent because they're literally everywhere in every district. But I don't know if it is the most watched, because with satellite television, people are able to catch any television station. COMNET is being watched all over the country, and on Facebook all over the world. So that may not be enough to guarantee re-election for the Patriotic Front. They also need to feature on private media, for example. But yes, because ZNBC is a national broadcaster, it must be accessible to all the political players as long as they are able to pay. They should be able to access it.
Is the media then very key in these elections? Whoever uses the media well could have an advantage?
Yes, whoever uses the media, including social media, very well, will have an advantage. Remember, President Obama used social media a great deal to win in the United States of America. So whoever frowns even upon social media may have a lot to lose. You have to use every platform that is available to you in order to convince the electorate to vote for you. I think that is very important.
Let's look at one issue, then we can open the lines and get some messages. About 4 major political parties are using females, as running mates. Does this add value to the ticket?
I think it adds a lot of value. What I see is this. Let's imagine the PF wins the elections. That is President Lungu's last term. Then obviously, come 2026, the Patriotic Front will have an advantage in fielding somebody who is already tested as vice president in Professor Nkanduluo. If the UPND win, Madam Talena Lumango will have been tested as having been vice president. And so when Hakainde Hichilema's second term elapses, then she will have to take over as president if all things remain equal in their situation, and so in the situation of the Patriotic Front. For the other political parties, it's the same thing.
Right.
So yes, it is value addition, like President Lungu has put it, that he wants a rainbow combination: a male president, a female vice president. If Professor Nkanduluo became president, or Madam Nalumango eventually became president at some point, then they would also need to have a male vice president.
Right.
Because you see, we have just bemoaned the low numbers of women participants in elections. So there are certain policy directions that political parties must take to ensure that they carry everybody along, rather than leaving some people behind.
Right. My guest, this evening, Dr. Houston Chiputa. We got about 15 minutes before we close, to bring in messages. And if you want, you can call us and raise, any issue with my guest. Do we have some messages? We don't have messages tonight. If we covered a lot of issues, please call us or send us some messages if you'd like to raise any issues with my guest. As we wait for that, if there'll be any messages or any phones, let's talk about Hakainde Hichilema. He's lost 5 times. Is this a disadvantage, or this is going to spur him to finally get what he has failed to get in the last 5 elections?
Well, about HH, let me say this as an historian. President Abdoulaye Wade, former President Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal, had been in opposition for 20 years before he eventually won power. Unfortunately, when he won, he refused to leave power. He was forced out. So, for me, I don't think it's a disadvantage. Why? Because perhaps it has given him more experience. Perhaps it has enabled him to mature, because he entered the race when he was fairly young. He's a lot matured now, politically and otherwise. And so he has, I think, carried with him a lot more advantages than in the past elections. The disadvantage, well, some people may say a loser is always a loser. No, you can lose 4 football matches and win the 5th one. So he also still has just as equal advantages as other presidential contestants. So I wouldn't say that it is a disadvantage, not at all.
A new government will face a massive, date, Chinese, date in particular. Is this a concern that could still ensure sleepless nights for the government that is going to come in? Do we have somebody on the line? Hello, good evening. Good evening.
Yes,
Evening, your name, please. Morgan.
Yes.
Yes, please, quickly go ahead, please.
My quick response is that the veteran channel, the person they report that you and we are so happy, and that guest which is there is also the veteran. But for me, what I want to say, the point is that this is the must know that this political party which is very violent, because the first one to throw the stone is the captive. Now, who is the power? Who is the first one to throw the stone? Who is the first one to throw the blow? So, that's why you have so much, we have so much the issue I can tell you that we have so much prisoners. Those prisoners are sinners. And if you think the person can you done that? Can you ban them? Can you tell them security? And other market, why should you arrest those people? You know, in this country we have got so much refugees. Rwandans, Angolans.
Could you quickly sum up, please?
That's what I'm summarizing. So the point is that what I'm trying to say, that all political parties should be denounced violence, and the issue that should be fair, equity. That's what you want to see, that you want to bring this violence. And the point is that if the UPN will bring violence, if the PF brings violence, who is provoking others? That's all the point. Yes. Because we know that each political party in this country forms government. All the cadres become excited.
Could you please sum up? Thank you very much. I think we got a gist of the question that whether the ECZ should have suspended the one guilty party instead of you know, in both of them. I think this is the issue also the Secretary General of, you know, PF, you know, raised, you know, this evening. Do you agree?
Well, you know, it takes two or more to tango.
Absolutely.
They have been fighting, not just people being beaten up. There have been fights, except in a fight, sometimes one is overpowered, depending on the numbers that are involved. So, ECZ being an arbiter, they are sitting in between these political contestants. I wouldn't want to think that they would have said, UPND, you are suspended, or they would have said, PF, you are suspended. You are heightening the tension in the nation. You are creating a crisis.
Absolutely.
And that's why I said they are experts at ECZ. They know how to abet crisis. So when they said for 14 days, PF and UPND are suspended in certain areas, but they have a blanket ban on all road shows. Okay? No road shows, whether it's PF, Socialist, or UPND, NDC, anybody, nobody should hold road shows. Again, that's a neutral stance. Because any one of these political parties can do that. And when others see the crowds they are pulling, because you see, when you move along a road, and they hear HHs along the road, crowds want to see.
Absolutely.
When they hear President Lungu is along the road, even more crowds want to come. Fred Membe is along the road, or Chishimba Kambwili, or whoever it is. Dr. Nevas Mumba is eloquently speaking on top of a vehicle along a road. Everybody will gather to want to see. And then those others want to disrupt that.
But doesn't this favor the president, because he's still going around the country, you know, inspecting in a project?
The challenge we have in our political dispensation is the president does not cease to govern even during a campaign period. The president continues to govern, and the president has those privileges to travel around to ensure that the nation does not grind to a halt. I shudder to think of a situation where, because we are having elections, so from May, the president sits in State House and says, I can't go anywhere. I don't want to see anything because I'll be accused of campaigning. Let's wait for August after elections. Then the nation will shut down.
What about those people, Doc, who are saying the running mate is hitching a ride on presidential transport, vice president transport? Isn't that a peculiar, advantage?
Well, it's a peculiar advantage only because it's PF that is in power. If it was UPND or NDC or Socialist or Rainbow, any other political party, I believe they would still do the same thing. Because when people campaign, they hold rallies, they do all sorts of things. But for a running mate, that is why it's a running mate. They have to be carried in the pocket of somebody.
Okay.
And that is how Professor Nkanduluo ends up being carried in the pocket of the vice president, who is constitutionally allowed to travel around the country, ensure that everything is running smoothly, ensure that everything is going as per requirement, because the PSs who are in each ministry and each province may not be enough to ensure that there's oversight on all these issues. So that's the strange situation we find ourselves in our democratic system. And I know that any other political party, if they were in power, they would do exactly what the Patriotic Front is doing.
Do you have any messages tonight? We're quiet. Any messages? Yep. Evening, Uncle Frank and Dr. Chiputa. I agree with you totally. Most of these parties are not explaining, issues, that they're going to address, from Emmanuel in Lusaka. Do you have anything else? Good evening. Thank you for your wisdom. You have ably guided the nation on a number of issues relating to governance. God bless you. Anything else? We done? Great. Before we close, the issue of the China date, because that is massive.
Yes, it is. But you see, every problem has a solution.
Yeah.
And I believe that we have Zambians who can manage this economy pay the debt, and still run the country. We just need a lot more focus. Yes, we may have made some mistakes in the past.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the resources that we borrowed have gone into resolving a lot of the challenges that we have been facing as a country. I imagine we are running it towards 19 million Zambians. If we had remained with the same number of districts that were there in 2011, we had remained with the same road infrastructure, the same small dams, the lack of bridges, very few schools, and by the way, very few universities, UNZA, CBU, and that's about it. Of course, the private universities have also come in very handy in resolving a lot of our challenges. So, for me, I think, yes, it's nice to say the money was stolen, the money was this, the money was that, but I think in terms of infrastructure, we should be able to pat ourselves on the back and say, we have done a good job. Right. Unfortunately, for those that want power, there's nothing good that I can say. Right. But I can assure you, when I wake up and I'm running to a TV station or a radio station early in the morning, previously I would start off at, for example, 6:30 to get to Capital FM at 7:15. Now I can start off from UNZA at 6:50 and still get to Capital FM at 7:15. Exactly.
If there are no messages, then I'll ask one or two last questions. Okay. Evening, Uncle Frank and Dr. Chiputa. I agree with you totally. Most of these, we had that before. Yeah. Anything else? Nothing else. Okay. Let me ask, one or two last questions. Doc, I think one important, issue. Whoever takes over the reins will have a task of uniting a divided country on religious grounds, on economic and social grounds, and sadly on tribal lines. What message would you, in advance, give the person who's going to take over the reins of how that person unites this divided country?
I think first and foremost, whoever wins should forget about never leave an enemy behind. That's a wrong stance in politics. Two, the socio-economic challenges that we face are things that we must confront as a wholesome entity, as a nation. So it will not be a situation where you want to develop certain parts of Zambia and leave out others. No. It will be a situation where we must attack what confronts us. The debt, for example. It is something that must be confronted by everybody. When you empower citizens to be very productive and to have so many jobs, we should be able to produce enough money to be able to pay our debts. That I'm very confident about. I cannot whimper and say we will not be able to pay the debt. No, it's so much. No, because we have invested it in some of the things that eventually will help us repay the debt. We should be able to pay the debt if we put our act together, except whoever wins the elections, there will be no honeymoon after they have won the elections. There will be a lot of hard work. They must land running.
I normally ask this question at the last, but I'll flip it, this time before I ask the last, questions. What issues belabor you with God? What issues do you discuss with God as an individual?
Well, that's a very personal question. Yes, what issues belabor me? The nature of what I do, Ambassador, requires that I impart into my students the best values. Because my challenge is when my student graduates and gets a job or becomes self-employed and very successful, I become irrelevant to them, then I will have succeeded. But if continually they come, I meet them, oh no, Dr. Chiputa, I have no job. No, but how about self-empowerment? No, there's nowhere to go. Then I begin to think, my God, am I failing in my work? So I pray to God every day that He gives me the wisdom to give not just historical knowledge, but the wisdom that is required for children, for students to be successful when they leave the university, when they go away from my hands. Because only then do we say we have been successful as a university. When we empower students to be entrepreneurs, when we empower students to put in their best wherever they are employed, then I say that, my God, you have empowered me, you have enabled me to achieve that which you destined me to do.
Finally, you know, you're a historian, and you're an author, you have written, you know, books, and you write in the newspaper, you give a lot of, you know, interviews. What history would you be telling, you know, a couple of years now, or even in the near distance, you know, about what this country has gone through, what this country is going through?
I think the history I would want to put forward is to say that we are a united nation. In spite of our challenges, we have remained one. In spite of our challenges, we are still able to succeed in certain fields. We fall, we stumble, but we pick ourselves up and move on as one Zambia, one nation. I think that is very, very cardinal. And it makes me very proud because apparently I also travel a lot around the country. And everywhere you go, you see how people are struggling. But again, you also see how people are making a successful story in various parts of this country. Because you see, to argue that it's all a disaster is a fallacy. We have a lot of Zambians who have become very successful at all levels of entrepreneurship, including some of our politicians. Some of them are very, very successful people because of the nature in which this country has been running. So I think I'm a proud person to be a Zambian, because I know I've fraternized with colleagues from other countries where someone says, oh, you can speak to that person and yet you don't speak the same language. How come you people? I say, no, but for us it's one Zambia, one nation, and it works for us. So at the end of the day, I think I would want to say that one Zambia, one nation works. We must work for it. We must invest in it, and we must ensure that it thrives.
Doc, you're God-given, you know, tomorrow, you know, at 10 o'clock in the morning, to be precise, 5 past, on my radio station this time, Capta FM 99.7, you and me start a show called Zambia's Roots. You know, quickly tell us, you know, what this will be all about. It's episodes, you know, starting from Northern Rhodesia. Just quickly tell our viewers and listeners who will be tuning in tomorrow, 99.7. We start, you know, the show every Wednesday.
Well, I would say in inverted commas, this is a thriller program in the sense that we want to capture, in a nutshell, Zambia's history from the very beginning, when we were not Zambia, when we were not Northern Rhodesia. We pick it up from there and run through several episodes, capturing each milestone, each stumbling block, each success story, each weakness, and we move on until we reach to the present. We reach the present situation. So I think it's important people find time to listen to it and hear, especially our youth, because sometimes people don't know where we're coming from. They know where we are. They may not know where we're going. We need to know where we are coming from. It's very important to appreciate that.
You know, I hope, you know, my executive producers, you know, Pastor Chilo and Mr. Chilo, don't mind me using Camnet to promote my radio station and the program which we're starting tomorrow, because it's going to be valuable to the Zambian, you know, people. Like the doc has said, especially the young people. Tomorrow, Zambia's Roots, you know, starting on Capta FM 99.7 with me and the doc. Doc, thank you very much, you know, for your insight in these many, you know, governance issues, and you know, God bless you.
I'm grateful. Thank you.
This has been Frank on Camnet. On the eve of my birthday, tomorrow, I'm 69. 50 years of those, 51 years of those I've spent in the media. I can only thank God. Like I keep on saying, do your very best, and God will do the rest. And thank you to God for all this wonderful journey. It's been a long journey, but it's been worthwhile. Thank you for watching. I'll be back next week. Good night to you all.